I see some familiar faces, which is great. Hi, Alex and Kira, some of my colleagues from Feroiga. Good morning from Dublin. I've put on my best Scottish band t-shirt today, Boards of Canada. A big fan. So wishing everyone a very safe internet day from Ireland. And I am really delighted to talk a little bit about our work with VR Auriga. So over the last 2 years, we've been kind of exploring the idea of virtual reality, in a youth work context, and how we can use this going forward. There's a lot to tell. I've tried to make it as nutshelled as possible. And for this conversation, I'm going to keep it quite focused on Outspace, the platform that we use initially and the platform that we continue to use to get people within the staff team and young people trained in and trained up using an immersive space and environment to connect with our service. So please, if there's any questions, don't be afraid to shout out and holler. I'm more than happy to try and answer them if I can. I'm also going to pre-warn everyone that I'm trying to kind of present this from VR. So it's VR in 2D, I'm sharing my screen, and I'm operating the slides from another computer here. So it's like live telly and animals and children kind of thing. So I'm going to go for it. And as I said, please feel free to ask any questions. So I'm just going to assume that most people haven't been in Outspace before. I do apologize for those who have. I will just go over the basics. Outspace is a social platform. It's an immersive social platform. It's a 3D space where, as avatars, we can immerse ourselves into this environment. It is owned by Microsoft. It's developed by Microsoft. And everyone is given this kind of apartment space. You get this really cool kind of VR apartment. And what we can do is we can kind of dress this and add things to this apartment as we see fit. And for this purpose, we've been using it as a Feroiga space. So you can see staff, pictures of staff on the wall. It just means if anyone joins our VR space, it kind of has that feel of a youth space immediately. Young people, caregivers will know immediately that, oh, okay, we're in a Feroiga space here. Oh, and the staff members today are Owen and Barry. That's what they look like. They're not purple avatars like you might see in a second. So I'm going to walk over to where the slides are, and I'll talk you through some of the features, which I might go back over again if I have time towards the end. So this on the right-hand side is a VR mirror. So I'm going to let you see what I look like as an avatar. That's me there. Hello all. I'm a bit kind of rigid today because I'm not in VR. I'm in 2D. If I was in VR, my head would be moving, my hands would be moving. It would be quite kind of similar and mimicking my movement in the real world. So this is the space. I'm not going to go too much into the detail of what's happening here at the moment because I'm just going to go to the slides. If I have time at the end, I will talk everyone through some of the main features here that you can see. So I'm just walking through. We have been using this space for staff members, volunteers, and young people to kind of get up and started and to kind of use this as a meeting space, a youth space. So here's my big cinema screen, which should mimic my other screen here. So again, as I said, I know that people just arrived. Please feel free to ask questions or go back over something, or indeed correct me if I am wrong. So again, thank you for offering the opportunity for me to talk to everyone today as part of the Safer Internet Day about our work with developing VR spaces for youth work purposes, basically. I was a little cheeky when I came up with the idea a few years ago, and I dropped the first 2 letters of Feroiga and I put in VR, and it kind of stuck a little bit. It is a little bit of a mouthful and people kind of have arguments about how it's pronounced. I'm going to call it VR Auriga. You'll hear probably different versions of this going forward. So a little bit about myself. I'm 16 years working as a youth worker. I did train as a secondary art and design teacher, which just wasn't for me. The tie alone was a no-go. But also outside of my work as a youth officer and currently a development officer with Feroiga, I am a digital artist. So I'd be working quite a bit using kind of like Photoshop, Illustrator for creative projects. So that's kind of started, that was the building block, so to speak, of me moving into VR myself as a creative space. And immediately perhaps about 3 years ago, once I had a go on an Oculus Go, immediately the light bulb went off, both as an artist and a youth worker. I was like, this is nuts in terms of collaborative, creative environments that you could be working on projects. For me, it just was an instant sold. So what I also really do put on the top of this conversation, both with colleagues and external guests to this presentation, is that I am a big fan and enthusiast of outdoor activities, surfing, camping, and certainly all of the above would have been incorporated into my work with young people over the last 16 years. So I wouldn't be in any way advocating for us all to be 100% in VR all of the time. And that is not something that I would see as an option or something that would be healthy, to be honest. However, with this technology and how it's growing so quickly, and how young people are moving to these spaces, I think it's going to be really important that we start looking at how we can be a youth service and youth officers in this immersive environment going forward. So a little bit about Feroiga. We're 70 this year. We were first formed in 1952. Feroiga loosely means in Irish development of youth, and we currently are the largest youth organization in Ireland. We work with 50,000 young people between volunteer-led groups and staff-led projects across the country, across the Republic of Ireland. So we've probably heard quite a few of these abbreviations, and again, it's such a work in progress. We just, the VR, the AR, the XR, like once people get to the XR part, they're like, what are we talking about here? And what is the metaverse? And what is Facebook doing? And there's just so many questions. And indeed, it's just the answer today could be different in a week or 2 weeks. It's just really evolving so quickly. So we'll start off with VR. It's virtual reality. And using our VR headsets, everyone kind of goes visually to perhaps Ready Player One, which isn't the worst example to talk about to some degree, but certainly the idea of putting a headset or equipment on your head and you being fully immersed into that 3D environment. So that would be virtual reality. AR is it's more of the digital content being augmented onto your environment. So very good examples would be the popular Pokemon Go app, the IKEA app where you can kind of try out furniture before you buy it, Snapchat where you can kind of be silly animals and things like that. And more recently, there was like an aeroplane tracker that you can kind of hold your phone up to the aeroplane in the sky, and it tells you there's an augmented kind of detail then that pops up. It tells you what the airplane is and where it's going and things like that. So AR is augmented reality, and then the XR is the extended or mixed reality. And I think, in my opinion, I think this is where this kind of immersive tech revolution, where it's going to land, I think it is going to be somewhere more in the region of this kind of mixed reality, this kind of the blending of AR and VR, where it's kind of be more like a kind of a lens that users will be using. Glasses, perhaps. I know Facebook and Ray-Ban have trialed and piloted a pair of glasses that has kind of smart lenses in them. And extended reality would be that, basically. It's kind of that blending of augmented and virtual content into your environment. A good example would be there's an app called Spatial, and basically you could be in your office, for example, and everyone's wearing this kind of HoloLens technology, these smart lenses, and your colleagues or your visitors or whoever could be augmented into your workspace as holograms. So they would appear to you as holograms, and you would appear to them as a hologram in their space. The best part about this technology is that if we were working on a design, for example, let's say it was a teapot, just off the top of my head, that augmented, that digital 3D shape object could be handed around the people in the room, regardless of them being augmented or not. So Spatial are already developing this, it's available, and I think we're at the kind of point where society is catching up with the technology rather than the other way around. So I think that's why in the next 5 to 10 years, you're really going to see this kind of equipment, this kind of experience being more and more accessible to services and to households, generally speaking. And then, not last but certainly not least, is this buzzword, which I really try not to use on a regular basis, is Metaverse, the Metaverse, which Mr. Zuckerberg is trying to own, which makes me kind of laugh a little bit. But we're still a long, long way off from the metaverse being a reality, so to speak. We have, with Outspace being a good example, the metaverse would be perhaps part of the metaverse could be Outspace, but Facebook / Meta / Oculus are trying to make the whole metaverse them, which is ridiculous to say that. So broadly speaking, the metaverse will offer a 3D digital version or a simulation of real world experiences. So this could extend to education, business, retail, entertainment, effectively. You're already starting to see Sky Sports that are offering immersive options for going to live games and things like that. And certainly I would see that developing more so, where you could probably pay an extra fee and be pitch side, for example, in real time, and you kind of be right on, literally on the sideline kind of thing. Another example would be like I think retail, I think Amazon are certainly looking at this kind of idea of shopping in the metaverse and going grocery shopping, for example. And you put all the virtual objects in your virtual trolley and you purchase them and they arrive at your door later on that day and stuff like that. So that's stuff that's already happening. It's just a matter of time before it becomes more part of our everyday lives, I suppose. So yeah, it's very much, as I said, it's very much a work in progress. COVID 100% has helped this whole conversation start to become more noticed. VR, for example, pre-COVID, when I was starting to use it, it was quite niche. People were like, oh yeah, I went on a roller coaster once, got sick, never again, see you later kind of thing. Whereas COVID, people kind of woke up and were like, oh, hold on, could we actually meet in there, or could we like work on that project that we can't work on now in the office kind of thing? And the answer is yeah, we can. And I think that started this kind of momentum, and it certainly hasn't slowed since the last 2 years. So moving on to the next slide, talk a little bit about Outspace. Again, Outspace was, in my opinion, way ahead of its time. It wasn't first owned by Microsoft, but someone in Microsoft, before it went under, someone in Microsoft saw the potential of this and bought it over before they kind of slid off and went under back in 2017. I'm sure that person who come up with that decision in Microsoft, or those people, are heroes now, because I think in the build up to COVID, Outspace was kind of just kept kind of alive in a back room. I would feel. I kind of visualize the the IT crowd, where they're kind of in a basement office with like one desk pre-COVID, and then the world literally woke up to immersive technology and Outspace as a free accessible platform that you could meet in and chat in. And certainly that's where, within Feroiga, that's where we sort of cut our teeth, and we started to look at, outside of Zoom, is there other ways that we could kind of connect both with staff members during these lockdowns and young people? And Outspace was the first place that we started to look at, and we haven't really stopped. And I certainly would look as the space that we're in now at the moment as an extension of my office. And certainly I would be in here on a regular basis, if not daily, showing, doing sort of demos, and maybe even meeting some external colleagues and things like that as well. Outspace, in addition to it being free and supported by Microsoft, it is 2D accessible. So I can do what I'm doing today and share my screen. And generally speaking, the feedback from young people, they like it. It's fun. It has lots of kind of fun interactables. The avatars alone, I feel, are a really nice feature for a youth group, because it allows that creativity. And certainly we would use the avatar feature as almost an icebreaker. So we would maybe remind the young people before the next meetup, oh, next time we're all going to be blue avatars, or it's most creative avatar wins prize and stuff like that. And in addition to all of that, Outspace has been hosting some really interesting kind of global events lately. More recently, the United Nations have a monthly kind of meetup now under Act Now, I think the project's called. And they go to different landmarks around the world and they replicate them. They do like a simulation in Outspace of them, and it's a free event. You can drop in there, and just in terms of a world building experience, I go there and just walk around going, this is amazing. So if you are in Outspace going forward and you see the United Nations Act Now event that's going to come up, I would recommend dropping in just to check it out. The other one that I really enjoy, and it's been like 3 years in the running now, is Burning Man, and they have a digital twin of their real world week-long event in the desert, and it's really, really cool. And I think because Burning Man is the nearest city is San Francisco. San Francisco has a big development sort of community. There's lots of developers who have worked on these different spaces for that particular festival. So again, when the next Burning Man comes up and they have the digital twin of it on Outspace, I'd recommend dropping in, checking it out. It's good fun. So that's a little bit of Outspace. I'll talk a little bit now about the VR Auriga pilot back in September 2020. So in the lead up to this, as a staff team, we were kind of looking at options for Zoom meetings with young people and what would be the best one. And we were looking at things like Twitch and, Facebook Live. And, we, as a staff kind of team around Feroiga, we were kind of troubleshooting and looking at different platforms. And that kind of was the moment when we started thinking about looking at a pilot. We were in the middle of our first national lockdown. Oculus Go equipment was recently announced to be discontinued. So everyone wanted a VR, but no one wanted the Oculus Go's because there was about 12 maybe months left on the shelf for them. And because at this stage, because of COVID, everybody wanted a VR, and everybody started to see this as an option outside of Zoom to continue working and doing what they do, basically. So I saw a little bit of an opportunity with the fact that the Go's were being discontinued, and I managed to get 39 of them. I was trying for like 10, and I got funding for like almost 40 of them, which made this kind of like side project become almost like a full-time job in itself. And then just using Feroiga are a national organization, and within that network we have lots of staff members who are really digitally savvy in different regions, and it was just a matter then of reaching out to those different staff members in different regions, talking over what we're going to try and do, see if they would have young people be interested, and we just went for it then. Ahead of the actual weekly meetups using Outspace, we did a collection of different kind of troubleshooting events just with staff members, just to make sure that we could lock down the events, that nothing kind of went wrong, that we could effectively guarantee that our Outspace meetups were a digital twin of a Feroiga club, where all the staff members are supposed to be there and all the young people are registered to be there. The first ones were hilarious because we weren't able to kind of fully lock them down, fully make them private. So we had basically every randomer in Outspace turn up at that particular time, which was funny. It's good learning though, and it was definitely a demonstration from our side that this is what we can't have if we had this live with young people. Thankfully, from that point to now, we really do know how to lock down and make private the spaces. But certainly having to allocate different staff members as VR bouncers was something that was funny, but we knew that we didn't want to have to be doing that with young people in the space. So the pilot was in September 2020, and it ran for 8 weeks. It was supposed to run for 6 weeks, and it turned out the last week was the first day of the second national lockdown. Yeah. So I was like, look, it's like we're probably the only youth service that's open, and even though we're in VR, we are still the only youth service that are open today. So we pushed it for another few weeks after that. The learning was amazing. We had 39 young people sign up to join, and out of that 39, we probably had about 2/3 who showed up on a regular basis. They were hour-long events, had that kind of cafe feel, and we had several staff members who were hosting each week. Those young people were from island communities. They were from really rural parts of maybe North Donegal right through to like Dublin city centre and everywhere in between. We had young people from care homes and 1 or 2 who were actually in refugee reception centres as well. The learning throughout this was massive, and there's lots of what we have learned from these initial pilots that really sort of helped guide us going forward, and it helped kind of create the kind of fundamental documentation that we're still using today. Things like, what do we do once we get into VR with a group of young people? Now what? It's kind of all eyes on us. And that's like almost a manual in itself, because it's almost like you focus too much on getting everyone up and trained and into VR, and then when they all arrive, it's kind of like tumbleweeds. Now what do we do? So thankfully we have worked out quite a few different activities that work in VR meetups, and young people tend to respond really well to them. Things like little scavenger hunts, hiding objects around the virtual environment, avatar fashion shows, walking debates, and generally just sort of greasing the wheels of the conversation a little more maybe than in a youth work real world environment. You need to kind of go that bit further to get the conversation going. But like there is that moment after a week or two where you can just see everyone just starting to kind of work as avatars, and it just feels, to me anyway, it feels very, very normal. And then once that kind of happens, then the kind of lid comes off and you kind of go, well, we can bring the youth service to the young person. They don't have to come to us anymore. You know, if we can do this, that, and the other. And once we start incorporating the kind of more recent activities like mindfulness into these conversations, it really does start joining the dots really quickly for me in terms of where we can go with this, and certainly how we can hold on to the momentum of this I suppose this immersive technology revolution that's happening at the moment. So that's a little bit about pilots. I'll move on to the other slide, and this kind of feeds into that really. Why are we moving into VR, and aren't we trying to get young people offline more, and all of those kind of things, which they're really valid kind of points, and they're really valid remarks that I don't disagree with. But as I said, this technology is here to stay, in my opinion. It's evolving very quickly, and I think we are going to start seeing like courses in kind of digital content, 3D animation, retail, like a lot of these kind of higher end industries such as engineering, architecture, design are already moving into immersive environments to do a lot of their kind of projects and work and learning. So my question that I constantly pose when I see another example of this kind of move into immersive environments is, what can we do as a youth service in here? Why can't we do what we do in these spaces? And certainly I would see a huge need going forward for us to have that as a cornerstone to what we do with young people going forward, for sure. The metaverse, again, like it is something that we are a long way off from what Mr. Zuckerberg is talking about, but it is coming, and it could be a little different than what he envisaged, but it's something that is being actively developed. And I would see that as, again, like, you know, if we had, just to use an example, like if we had a digital twin of a Feroiga service in the metaverse, that could be staffed every evening, for example, and young people could drop in from any part of the country, and they could sign up to drop into a mindfulness class or a conversation around mental health or whatever, or could even just be a cafe kind of meetup where, you know, we play drafts or something like that, you know. And that's kind of what we can do, and that's what we can do now. What can we do in 5 years? What can we do in 10 years, you know? And that's kind of exciting to me also. The other thing as well, like PlayStation, for example, are launching their second generation VR. They're really doubling down on this technology as part of their platform going forward. And with that, we're starting to see these kind of more popular games and apps such as Minecraft and Fortnite look at an immersive version of their game, or they're going to move fully into VR for their game going forward. So if you kind of look at how popular those games are at the moment, how popular are they going to be in VR, and how popular are youth services going to be if we can connect with young people using those games as something that we could do together, and keeping that link going forward. I think I've got everything on this slide. Any questions? Have I got everyone with me still so far? Okay. So I'm going to move on, and again, I'm talking and I'm focusing specifically about Outspace. Yeah.
Pam in the chat. Pam, I don't know if you want to ask it yourself or if you want me to ask it.
Hi, sorry. Yeah, the question I put in the chat was just about if you had a crib sheet for setting up your VR and making sure it was safe. And if you do, can you share it? I
can share a kind of a cheat sheet of how to get up and running with Outspace. And I would really recommend Outspace as the first stepping stone if you were looking at bringing your own skill set up to using VR, and then moving into a kind of a group work, small group work, one-to-one project with young people. I would also really sort of like to point out that it will take on average about 6 weeks. If you're a new user to VR, it's going to take about 6 weeks for you to kind of bring up your skill set just using VR. Just kind of the notion and letting your kind of senses and let them go and give them over to VR. It is a bit of work, and it would be really unfair to expect anyone just to pop a headset on and be a youth worker or a teacher or with it, it does. And I think that's what's kind of happened. We've had a few backfires where people have tried to get up and running too quickly. And again, with the kind of internal training that I'd be doing, it's one of the things I'd really sort of emphasize is to allow yourself time to just get used to being in VR and used to be an avatar. And that starts with like 5 minutes, building up to, 10 minutes, 12, 15 minutes. Going in there for an hour is going to make you dizzy, make you nauseous, all those nasty things that are one of the obstacles that we'd be looking at in terms of problems along this kind of journey so far. So I've talked a little bit Outspace. I've talked the fact.
Sorry, can I ask a stupid question? I'm just looking at Altspace website. You don't need a VR headset to use Altspace. You can do it on a Mac, on a Windows. Amazing.
Yep. So the screen that you're looking at now is 2D. So I'm sharing my screen and I'm in Outspace as a 2D avatar. So yeah, it's free. It's Microsoft supported. The support from Microsoft more recently is really great. When we first started doing this 2 years ago, it was tumbleweeds. It was like just trial and error, and that's kind of why we had to do those kind of staff-led kind of pilots, because there was very little information out there. We just had to figure it out ourselves. So it's 2D, it's free. It used to be available on tablets and phones, which they pulled, which could come back. And it's like constantly updating. The avatars had a big kind of upgrade maybe about a year ago. They look really static. Even in VR, they look kind of boxy, whereas now they have that more kind of cartoony, almost Fortnite kind of appeal. So yeah, and it's a really great starting point in a potential VR journey. The only thing is Microsoft have brought in very recently that new accounts need a Microsoft Hotmail Outlook account, which is a little bit of a pain because that's now something that I have to incorporate into the training, because it's now like you're getting set up on Oculus, which needs a Facebook account, iRoll, and now Outspace, which we would still be recommending. You're going to need your Microsoft account sort of thing. So the reason for the iRoll with the Oculus is because Oculus were pretty much on a weekly basis tweeting that they would never require users to have a Facebook account. And then last Christmas, they kind of went, do you know what, actually? See, do you know that thing that we were saying every week that we didn't want you to do? Well, no, we do want you to have a Facebook. So again, that was a little bit of a pain now, because you have to incorporate that into the training. And we have to set up these kind of, like, I call them non-personal steps for young people to set up non-personal accounts. Or we wouldn't be advocating for young people to sign up to Facebook to join us, basically. So creating a VR youth space, or an Outspace VR youth space, after you kind of get the feel of Outspace and you maybe went to a few workshops and you've kind of worked on your avatar and got a feel for what it is like, and you kind of know the rope, so to speak. You're starting to look then at, firstly, the young people you're going to work with in here. Is it going to be a one-to-one group? Is there a focus to it, or is it just a cafe? Is it a kind of pilot kind of project to see where it goes? And you're looking at, do they have access to equipment? Do you need to loan the equipment? And then what it is you're going to do in there. So the rule of thumb, really, any kind of VR meetup, we would be suggesting that it's 45 minutes, no longer than, simply because of comfort levels. Just with the goggles or the headset and just being in VR, 45 minutes plus, it tends to get a little uncomfortable for people. And certainly we've noticed with the VR youth panel, after about 35 minutes, some of the young people will drop off the call. So things have to be kind of bite-sized. Then you need to start looking at Outspace as an extension of your youth service. So the analogy that I would use is if it was a youth cafe in Outspace, all the young people need to be registered to be there. All the staff members need to be registered to be there. Caregivers need to know that the young people are with you for that given time. And certainly you wouldn't leave the door open to a high street or a beer garden, because if you don't make if the meetup private, you're going to have people drunk people arrive, and you're going to have randomers drop in and ask you silly questions and stuff like that. And that happens. That's just the internet. Generally speaking, Outspace isn't that nasty of a place in my experience. You just have people asking questions, people trying to like pick your nose, your avatar nose and stuff like that. But generally I have heard very little kind of really negative stuff. But certainly for youth projects and work with young people, it's only for OIGA staff members, volunteers, and for OIGA young people that are in those spaces. And that's what we would be advising for anyone who's considering this. So it talked about the meetups must be private, always staff and volunteer hosted. So we would be, again, turning the virtual lights on and turning the virtual lights off. So once, let's say it's from 7:15 to 8 p.m., we would be the staff members would be the last people to leave that event. And beforehand, we'd be letting the caregivers and the young people know in an email, we're online tonight from 7:15 and we're offline at 8 p.m. sharp. And it's really important that you identify those times clearly, because we have had scenarios where young people have tried to kind of pretend that we're still online, and they're heading off to other games and stuff, and we're not. So yeah, so that's kind of like creating. And then what it is we do in there, I think things that work really well. I mentioned like scavenger hunts, icebreakers such as kind of walking quizzes. There is a flying option, which I'm not going to do today in Outspace. It's really good fun. You have this kind of little pen and you can kind of fly up into the sky. We have held flying lessons with young people, which is really popular. That would be kind of more, a month and a half down the line. It wouldn't be one of the first activities I'd be recommending. And then the last thing really is we have had young people join. We have a VR youth panel, a national VR youth panel. Some of the young people have been there from the beginning last year. And then we have young people join in more recently. So we realized quite quickly, it's kind of that scenario where it's like a young person starting a new school midterm. They're kind of like, uh-oh. So it's being mindful of that and allocating them maybe a mentor, a young person, or a staff member to kind of walk them in and introduce them and things like that. So again, it's all really good learning, and it's something that we're just constantly updating the guidelines and the policy and things to be mindful of. And then if people are stuck, we would troubleshoot it ourselves. We just run through it as avatars in VR ourselves as a staff team. So going forward, this year, so in June, last year, should I say, we pitched the idea of VR OIGA to Rethink Ireland Digital Solutions. So it's a government initiative that is looking for digital solutions to social issues. So we pitched and we were successful. And for this year going forward, we're using our skill set as a youth organization, and we are actively looking at young people who are traditionally overlooked by youth service because of where they live, because of how they're a disability, because they might be in a hospital setting going through treatment, they could be young carers, etc., etc. So we are actively identifying through different services young people to be referred into our VR OIGA projects. One of the first projects that we've already completed is the VR Island project. So if you can notice there on the map of Ireland, there's the purple pins. Those purple pins all represent young people who joined us for an 8-week project in Outspace. We shipped the VRs out to them. We got them up and running in VR, and we opened up a VR youth cafe each Saturday. It was a resounding success, and we still have, I think it's 5 members from 2 of the islands, or 3 of the islands maybe, that are still part of the VR youth panel. And even in, like, particularly at this time of year, I get the sense that they're just delighted to have that hour 45 minutes every week where they can drop in and sort of connect with other young people and staff members. It's all about the Frisbee golf at the moment in Rec Room, and the paintball. So I just like the idea of perhaps a young person in Rathlin there, the very north of the island, playing paintball with a young person from Bear Island at the very south. And we're in Dublin and they're kind of like, hitting us with paintballs and stuff like that. And it's fun. It's fun, and it's kind of maybe a little bit of light relief for some of those young people who are living in kind of really remote and isolated areas at this time of the year. So that was the Rethink Ireland. That's a work in progress for this year, and certainly we've got some really, really interesting referrals for that project. young people, Irish Wheelchair Association have referred 3 young people in who just started our national youth panel. And we also have referrals for 3 young people who are carers as well. We have a link with Children in the Hospital. And the idea is that we're going to get headsets to young people who are maybe going through treatment. And we're going to open up a youth space conversation for those young people and see if that could be maybe more towards the end of this year, but certainly the conversation is ongoing. I've talked a little bit about the VR Youth Advisory Panel. It's going from strength to strength. I think the winter months particularly, it really comes into its own. And we have young people literally from every part of the country. And the only thing I would say is we need a few more girls. We have 3 or 4 girls. It'd be great if we had that better balance. And we're going to start using the young people on that panel for feedback, opinion, ideas, and how to shape this going forward for sure. Another interesting project for this year, and it is ongoing, is a cross-border project with our city in Belfast. And we are working in a VR app called Tribe XR. It's there, that's in the bottom left-hand corner there. It's a DJ app. So it's a collaborative, immersive DJ environment. So you could have 12 people in that kind of music room there. So we're learning to DJ. And we're going to, the idea is maybe by Easter, we're going to have a number of young people from Belfast and a number of young people from Ireland or Republic of Ireland. And we are going to, we're going to do a set and stream it hopefully to Twitch. So that's the tribe. And then the last thing really is we're starting to kind of scratch the surface of kind of more self-care conversations and activities. And again, using Outspace because it's just like our extended home now at this point in time. But certainly the feedback from some of our mindfulness activities that one of our colleagues, Donna McMillan, has been working on has been a resounding success, like to the point where I would say, having been part of some of those events, that young people in a VR mindfulness kind of conversation are much more invested to it than they would perhaps in a room together standing in a circle. There's a lot more buy-in, I felt. Added to that there's a really, really cool feature in Outspace that you can mute your audience, which again, you kind of go looking for sometimes in the real world, which just isn't there yet. But yeah, you see the young people standing in a circle and, you know, no one leaves. And Donna is a trained mindfulness practitioner. And she goes through like maybe a 10, 12-minute kind of mindfulness routine. And again, we're starting to look at that mindfulness piece as something that we can incorporate to more and more of our different activities in VR. So that is it. Have we got time? I was just going to show around the actual the space, Liz, if we have a little bit of time.
Yeah,
so one of the features, and this I've just been using, this is like a web projector that we're looking at here. The slides were coming through, so we could effectively stream in video content from YouTube perhaps here if you wanted to. It's a little, you have to kind of go into developer mode to load it into Outspace, but it is doable. If I can do it, anyone can do it. You can bring in your own branding. Got a nice Irish and Scottish flag there. I've got a skull on the top of it. I think that was from Halloween, polar bear. But there's Velcro, VR Velcro balls basically, and we can pick those up. We were here in VR, we can pick them up, see them lighting up blue, and we can fire them at there's a kind of a dartboard, Velcro board behind those logos. So that's one of the basic interactables that we can bring into this space. And again, it's that kind of part of when everyone drops into this meetup for the first few weeks and they're kind of looking at you going, now what do we do? So it's having this kind of array of little almost fidget toys that you can do as avatars and just sort of get the conversation going. So that would be part of like the basic world building features that are part of Outspace. And again, the world building features is a really interesting part of this conversation. And I think going forward, we will be in a scenario where young people in VR or immersive technology will be building their own youth space. So the idea that youth services and youth workers would be visitors to their youth space is something that I think it's amazing, and we're well on the road to that happening. So that's kind of world building, that's kind of next level conversation, but certainly Outspace from the very beginning has these kind of basic world building features. So you can bring in little features like this. What is that? It's kind of like a xylophone kind of thing. Well, there's the the drumsticks, and if I pick those up and I hit those little cowbell things there, that it would make a noise. We have a bonfire. We can pick up the sparklers. The sparklers will light, and you can chase people around like you would do if you were a child or me at Halloween. We can wear a hat. Again, it's just silly little kind of interactable games and features that it does embedded in using these is basically young people and staff members just getting the hang of how do you select wearing a hat in VR. So you can try a hat on. Let's see if I can select something here. Let's see if I can put a straw hat on. Does that work? Oh yeah, let's see. We'll check the mirror and see. And yeah, there's my lovely hat. Superb. On my head sticking through it. See that? It's a bit weird. Anyway. I talked about branding, logos. I think it's important, particularly for the group, the young people who were on the islands. It was important for us to bring in a visual of where those islands were, simply because they were unaware of the next neighboring island community was from them. It's almost like the woods. You can't see the woods for the trees kind of thing. So it was really good to have that visual for them. And then one of our really kind of go-to activities as part of maybe meetups with groups of young people is a walking debate, walking quiz. So that's what the A and the B is for. And again, it's kind of silly, kind of fun questions, kind of back to that youth work 101. And it just gets them moving as a group. It gets that conversation going. It's lighthearted, and yeah, for us as hosting staff, we can kind of chalk that down then as something that kind of works. You know, try this, try that, and then always have one or two activities in the wings, whatever that might be. So one of the things, like you can see, like there's a jellyfish here. So this is one of the in the wings activity. So if you're running out of things to do or whatever that might be, there's several of these hidden. I think there's 7 of them actually hidden around this whole environment. And they're quite small, or they're hidden behind different objects. So you'll say to the group, maybe the first 2 or 3 young people to find all of these, I will actually post you out some chocolate, and they're gone. They're just like, you just see the smoke and they're off, you know. And then we just post a little package of chocolate or whatever to an island or Midlands or wherever that might be. So talk about the mirror, the hats. I'm not going to do the fly-in. The fly-in's just too much. And I think that's it. I think that's everything really. That's as best an overview of our journey with Outspace to date. What I would say, we do have a collection of other apps, like the DJing one that I talked about. There's a graffiti one also that we were working with, and a sculpting one. They are different, slightly different conversations, but it's the same kind of format: multi-user, collaborative, and private. And basically, if a VR app or experience has those features, can we make it private? Is there a multi-room space? Can we make it private? What we do in there, providing that it's appropriate, the content is almost an after, what happens after the fact. It's more asking the young people, what would you like to do? Crazy golf. Okay, let's see if we can find an app that is multi-user. It has a private feature, as in we can set up a private meetup, and then we can do crazy golf. So that's kind of the rule of thumb that we operate. And then we would maybe trial that within the staff team as well beforehand. And that, I think, is that.
Wow, thank you so much, Barry. That is just fantastic, so inspiring. There are some questions in the chat, and I'm sure that people would like to take the opportunity to ask you some more questions. So,
Sure.
or maybe we can just open it, and if people want to ask the question that they've posted or something else, then please just.
Oh yeah, sorry, I'm just seeing the chats now.
Oh, no.
Okay. I'll go right to the top. I forgot to mention is we've made some really, really cool links with some of our colleagues in Scotland. So I see Alex there on the call. Hi, Alex. As well as Connor Maxwell, I think. So we have some ongoing conversations, and the idea is that we're going to do some kind of cool projects between young people here in Feroiga and hopefully young people up in the Highlands and Inverness. And yeah, there's the conversation is building momentum for sure. There's also conversations happening in the States and Europe as well. So and the idea is, like, once we start getting the kind of the fundamentals nailed down, it becomes less of a localized project and becomes more of a international one very quickly, you know. Okay, so questions. Please turn your camera on. What is the name? The virtual space is Outspace. Yeah, thanks. Okay. An Oculus. If you've got an Oculus already at home, I would really recommend giving it a go and kind of using it, sort of parking the Beat Saber, because Beat Saber is cool, but looking at it more as a youth working tool. The blimp is, yeah, the blimp is something that just is like an old friend. He just kind of rotates forever kind of thing. It's not, I didn't bring him in there. Yeah, the age is 13 and older. So our policy would fall behind what Oculus and Outspace would be recommending. Young people need to be 13 or older, and that's what Feroiga projects would be as well. The equipment you need, Oculus Quests are 249 euros. They are amazing. It's a little bit depressing to say that because it's the Mr. Zuckerberg trying to take over the world, stroking a white cat probably somewhere. But the word is that Oculus, Facebook are subsidizing this equipment. And that, like the next best version of VR, similar to the Oculus, is I think it's like 500 euros or something like that. So it all fits into this plan for the metaverse to be kind of their thing. And but yeah, we can kind of we can use this equipment because it's the best equipment out there for your dollar at the moment. How can this be linked to other apps like Discord? We have a Discord server for the young people in the youth panel, the VR youth panel, and that's just getting started. There is a really active Outspace Discord server as well, like all around world building and stuff like that. Set up a dummy Facebook account. Non-personal, we say non-personal. Don't use burner or dummy. No. Yeah, so what we do is, so a Feroiga project, let's say the Crib, for example, and they have 4 VR headsets. They would set an Oculus account up for the Crib 1, the Crib 2, the Crib 3, and maybe incorporate a name in there, like Joe Crib 1, Lucy Crib 2 kind of thing. And then you set up usually a Gmail account, and then you link that Gmail to your Facebook account. And usually if you incorporate a name and a date and something like that, the Facebook bots tend to kind of be okay with it. If you set up like Jimi Hendrix 1960, whatever, it'll kick you off. Is this multiple spaces? Yes, sorry, yes, okay. So Outspace I'll just show you actually, I'm still sharing my screen. Outspace have and I would recommend actually, one of the things, if you do set up an Outspace account, it has a really vibrant and growing community of everything, like learning Mandarin, church groups, open mic, live events. Like the one that I would really sort of recommend to this conversation would be, there's an ongoing rolling series of workshops by educators in VR. They're European and North American based, and they have lots of different kind of experts and educators and researchers in there, and they would have like different focus groups, different conversations through, like from early stage world building through to one of the more obscure ones was like shamanistic drumming in VR, which was fascinating. Mad as a box of frogs, but really fascinating at the same time. But they're always really well kind of delivered, and they have a really active Discord server as well, educators in VR. But yeah, there's loads of different spaces, public spaces. There are also the option for you to kind of create your own spaces. So for today, we were in my Outspace apartment, which everyone gets a version of once they set up an account. But you can set up your own event space. I'll just show you really quick. Go into events, go to my events, and then you can create an event there. To create an event is another conversation. It's probably a whole other workshop. But you can set up a private event. You can kind of bring in branding activities. You can bring in like an itinerary, have guest speakers, and most importantly, all of your guests are invited there. There'll be no randomers attending. So yes, to that question, there are multiple spaces on here. Being from Ireland, do you use Engage? Yes, we have a subscription to Engage, and it's great. However, the feedback from, we've been using Engage now for Engage is a VR platform which is worldwide popular, but it would be more sort of focused towards educational or business purposes. So the avatars and the visuals from the get-go would be a lot more serious looking. Personally, the avatars look to me a little bit like zombies, but I kind of park that. They have that kind of like dead eye kind of thing going on. But Engage is amazing, and we have used it. However, the young people find it a little bit too serious compared to Outspace. And they tend to want to go to Outspace or Rec Room or kind of those more kind of fun, visually fun looking places. But certainly we are due to have a second subscription to Engage, and it's worth checking out as well, similar to Outspace if you were interested in taking this further. We have just bought some Oculus headsets, our first time using them really. Is there anything you'd recommend using and exploring to begin? Yeah, totally. So there's loads of demos. So the first app that we recommend would be for you to go and download First Steps. It's free from the Oculus Store, and it is your first steps in VR. It talks you through the basics. It shows you how to pick things up. So First Steps would be the best first steps app. I'd also mention places not to go. VR roller coasters. YouTube has a VR channel. Don't go near it. It's like people base jumping, and it's like just nausea central. Don't go near any of those spaces. But check out the demos. Certainly Outspace would be high on the recommendation for early kind of immersive experiences and how to kind of just get used to being an avatar. Like we know, like as staff, we're high-fiving and pointing, picking things up really easily. But it does take time to get there, but you will get there. So yeah, Oculus is really great. Another thing I'd mention, if you do have an Oculus headset, Oculus was set up initially by a young person in California by the name of Palmer Luckey. So when he was 17, he came up with a prototype for the Oculus VR, and I'm sure it was looked like a bin on his head. But 2 or 3 years later, now he was like 21. Facebook bought the whole Oculus off him, the whole company off him for $2.5 billion. So Mr. Luckey found himself in a very lucky position. However, it all went terribly wrong when Facebook found out that he was seen to be funding the Trump campaign or something like that, and he got kind of kicked off Facebook. So the story kind of goes then, Mr. Luckey went off, and he kind of now has developed or bought into this kind of platform called Sidequest. And Sidequest is basically an alternative to the Oculus Store, and it hosts hundreds and hundreds of games. Some of them are free. It's kind of these startup games, immersive kind of experiences and stuff. I'd recommend looking into Sidequest because there's just loads of content. From like games through to kind of like activities. There's just so much on Sidequest, way more than the Oculus, and it's also kind of Mr. Palmer Luckey kind of getting back at the big guy kind of thing. Engage. 5 minutes left. Okay, I think that's it. I think I've went through those as best I could.